Alan, what are we expecting then in terms of this summit, in terms of concrete deliverables, if any?
I think the expectations are unfortunately very low. We're expecting, at the very least, some agreement on a joint statement about climate action, which is one of the few things that China and the EU can agree on. Other than that, everything is up in the air right now, with von der Leyen and Xi meeting in Beijing right now. And from their opening speeches, we know that Xi Jinping wants a win-win relationship with the EU, which he does a lot of trade with. And on the other hand, EC President von der Leyen also said that the relations between the two economies are at an inflection point. So what does that mean? It could mean that relations could improve from here or deteriorate from here. It doesn't say a lot. But then to put it in more concrete terms, I think they're looking to have some agreements on the trade imbalance between China and the EU. China specifically exports a lot more to the EU than it buys from the bloc. And the EU has been unhappy about that for a while. But the complaint only became more intense in recent months because the imbalance has gotten worse with the U.S. shutting off some of the exports to that market.
Yeah, and the dynamics, of course, around this trading relationship have shifted so dramatically in recent months. And now, of course, in the context of the reports around the EU and the US potentially getting closer to that 15% tariff deal and how that factors into European officials thinking on this as well. China was seen as seeking closer ties with the EU, given the global trade conflict and tensions. Has that changed, Alan?
Yeah, so China's position has since the second trade war this year been that all the countries that are not the United States should just band together to fight these unilateral tariffs. And at the time when people heard that, and China gave the same message to the EU, there were discussions about how the EU and China could boost the mutual trade relationships and cooperation in many different areas just because they have some sort of a shared common rival, which is Trump. But now, if the EU is getting closer to a deal with the US, there might be less pressure on the EU to strike a deal with China, however that looks. But then the idea that the EU and China will come together just because Trump is threatening tariffs on both of them has always been one built not on much substance because the two economies have a lot of issues that they need to sort out that are not confined to just trade matters. For example, the EU takes a lot of issue with China's support for Russia after it invaded Ukraine. Now that support is economic and diplomatic, but then if you look at public opinion surveys in Europe, they consider Russia the greatest threat, and so China's support for Moscow is going to rub them the wrong way. So, and the other thing is that when the EU looks at all these exports, especially vehicles and cars, and they see that the export to China have fallen a lot, and on the other hand, China's export of electric vehicles to the bloc has jumped dramatically over the last couple of years. So that is one example of the trade imbalance that is preventing the two economies from getting closer together.